Ah! Hello, everyone all around the world. Welcome to Soho Media Club. This is episode 2, season 5. My name is Muki Kulhan, and I am an executive XR producer by day, Soho Media Club resident host by every month, once or twice. We welcome you back for our second ever live simulcast across LinkedIn, across YouTube, and our sohomediaclub.com. And we welcome all members from all around the world in all shapes and sizes. And no matter where you're coming from, Soho Media Club is here to be discussing about the collaboration, working together, and much, much more than that. So if you're a Soho Media Club regular and you've been appearing at our secret venues pre-lockdown, you know that we have a different venue and a different location every single month. And we miss Soho so much. We miss seeing everyone. We miss the bands. We miss going to have a beer at the pub. So we sent our co-founder, Tom, to have a little sneak around Soho to capture some of the images of what's happening now, and also to create a little clip to show you a little reminder of what Soho Media Club is all about. Roll VT.
We are the creators of content, tasked with holding a mirror up to society. We, the media industry, are responsible for reflecting that society both on screen and off screen. Our crew, our content, our productions, our promotions, it affects the stories told, and those stories impact the people listening. As storytellers, we can use our voice for the voiceless. Our passion for the love of stories and humanity can empower us to fight for equality. Equality and diversity in all respects. Men, women, boy, girl, trans. Asian, Caucasian, black, poor, wealthy, rich. Young, older, old, gay, grey and gay. Abled, disabled, enabled. It is not just diversity through identity. We need cognitive diversity to collectively deal with the problems of today and the uncertainty of tomorrow. COVID-19, sustainability, Me Too, Time's Up, food security. It is in these times of crises we need people who think differently. And we are at our best when we support each other. But this is not just a declaration. This must be a demonstration. This is not a moment. This is a movement, a collective mission. Let's not take our industry for granted. Let us all keep pushing the boundaries, make change small and big every day. Can we change the narrative? Shall we?
Welcome back. So Soho Media Club is more than just a party. We do love talking to people and sharing the messages and sharing the stories. So without further ado, we want to crack right into our amazing all-star lineup panel that we've got today and great speakers. So here we go. This is live wherever we are in the world, but what a lineup, guys. We do have a great discussion, so let's get straight into it with our very first guest. Virtual round of applause for Yu-Fai Suen, who's the film producer and managing director of the BERKELEY Media Group. Welcome, Yu-Fai. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me onto the show, Muki. It's great to be here.
Awesome. We're so excited to have you here because we know that you've got such an amazing, rich history of being a producer and in the film industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and where you are right now, what you're up to?
I'm actually in Riga in Latvia because we actually finished shooting the movie here. We wrapped about 5 weeks ago, and we shot it during the COVID crisis. But just a little bit about my background. I ran Elton John's Rocket Pictures for about 5 years, developing and producing films for Elton and David Furnish. And then I spent a couple of years as managing director at Pinewood Studios, being head of their production and financing division. And in the last couple of years, my own company, BERKELEY Media Group, and we're developing about 30 odd projects across film, television, from storytellers across the globe, from the US, UK, Europe, India, China, South Africa. So we want to hear a lot of stories from voices around the world. So that's what we do.
Fantastic. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the production that you're working on now? I believe we've got the one and only Mickey Rourke on your film set. And what happened during post-lockdown? Yeah, that is Mickey Rourke, right?
Okay, so
very, very.
It is Mickey Rourke. Yeah. He's a pussycat at the end of the day. Okay, so
the dirt.
I came to Latvia to shoot this film called War Hunt. It's a horror, World War II horror fantasy, where a bunch of US soldiers go into the Black Forest in Germany, and they come across some amazing witches. That's basically the story. So we started pre-production in January, February, and I came towards the end of February for pre-production, and we were about a week into production when the whole COVID thing in Europe started. Italy, started reporting huge numbers of infections and deaths. We heard we were given notice that the Latvian government was going to close the borders. Mm-hmm. And so we had a mad dash to actually get all our cast into the country. So literally we rung Mickey Rourke's agent and said he's not due to come for 10 days, but he's literally got 48 hours to get to Latvia. So he had to get on a plane that evening, go to London, and then fly from London to Riga. And we literally got him into the country with like 2 hours to spare. So I mean, that was kind of seat of our pants stuff. But we got our star into the country. We shot the movie, and now we're doing post-production. But we had to take a decision whether to go ahead, actually. And that, I think that was, with the producers, it was sitting there and saying, look, the world is, going crazy. It's going upside down. This thing is really bad. What should we do? And we decided to push ahead, because I think we would have kicked ourselves if we hadn't. We kind of we're going to go for it. So we sort of pretty much overnight decided to put in the COVID sort of procedures, face masks, hand sanitizers, having temperature taken twice a day on set, doing social distancing as far as possible. I mean, we've got some of the photos where you can see the crew with face masks. I mean, there were times when we had to be together, like where we're looking at a monitor here, but mostly, luckily, we were shooting a lot in the forest, so there's a lot of space out there. And then when we're on set, we had 2 stages, so we could actually separate people. Right. But the main challenge actually was the meal times, because that's when everyone breaks and people start going to the catering tent, and there you had to do the social distancing. So instead of sort of 45-minute break, it will take an hour and a half because people are just lining up, having their temperatures taken, doing the hand sanitizers before going into
So much more on that.
And again, I beg your pardon.
Sorry, yeah, so much more on that checklist to do. It's not just a typical film set. You've now are looking after beyond the welfare of your staff, and it's probably not even included in insurance. Was it?
Absolutely. I mean, that was a thing, because producing a movie is kind of balancing 100 plates at any one time in any case, and then added to in the COVID crisis, you kind of go, oh my god, like how many more things do we have to think about? And every day we're just praying that nobody, the infections didn't happen. Would people's temperatures been taken, contact forms being filled out. But I think we're also on the slightly lucky side, because Latvia is one of the lowest sort of infection and death rate countries in the whole of Europe. I think even to date there's just over 1,000 infections, and I think 15 or 16 deaths. So we had luck on our side. But going through that experience, we proved that we could do it. We wrapped, and we're so happy we could do that. And wrapping is always a great experience. You kind of go, oh my god, that's a wrap. But wrapping this was just like, I've done a ton of movies, and wrapping this was just so special to actually do it when we're reading about all the countries, all the productions stopping everywhere. When Tom Cruise can't film, and you've got people being airlifted out of Morocco after with a few days left for shooting. You hear all these stories, and you kind of go, how long is our luck gonna last? And we got there, and that last, it was that 3 a.m. we wrapped, and it was like, oh my god, we did it. And through that experience, we've actually been able to work with the Latvian government, who've given us permission to shoot more here. We've actually got insurance as one of the very few countries, I think, to get insurance against for COVID and production insurance. And we're actually prepping.
Yu-Fai? We might have lost him there. It's just a tech show, folks. Just in case. Oh, there you are, honey. There you are. I just want to congratulate you on finishing that project. You put everything in place. You gathered some last-minute learnings. You had to pivot within a second, and you not only managed to keep your production going, but you managed to keep your talent happy, which is always sometimes an interesting feat. So we're going to wrap you up and move swiftly on, and then we'll regroup on some of your stories to share with the panel discussion in just a short space of time. And want to move over to Archie Kalyana, who's the diversity producer of cricket for BBC Sport. Now, of course, as you've gotten to know me over the last couple months, Soho Media Club, I'm a sporty kind of girl. And whenever we have a women in sport production, I get very excited. So welcome, Archie.
Good, thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I'm so pleased to hear we're on the same page. Thank you.
100%. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and about this role. We hear that it was kind of crafted specifically for you and the kind of amazing achievements and challenges that you're implementing into the BBC Sport, not only to the BBC Sport, but the world of sport.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that's something to live up to, isn't it? Yes, so this role was specially created. The BBC obviously understands that we've got some challenges around diversity, etc. And in sport, they've made that massive step forward where they created this diversity producer role, and they spoke to me about it. I applied and I got it. So my role is basically to create content specifically for a South Asian audience, and it's a bit of a dream job, Muki, to be completely honest. I love cricket. If you're from an Asian background, then cricket is pretty much in your blood. There's no two arguments about that. You can like football, you can like other sports, but cricket is in our blood. So my job is to create this fantastic suite of content, whether it's film content, Dusra, a podcast that I've been producing recently, filming all over the globe, really, back and forth to India and Pakistan, and make that content that we know there's a massive appetite for it, and the South Asian audience are mad about cricket.
And what are the kind of situations that come up that the objectives that you have to fill in terms of the sport of cricket and diversity?
It's a tough challenge. I mean, like I said, it's, I've got an audience who have got the appetite, who want to see good cricket content. So it's kind of identifying, who are the heroes, who are the kind of the David Beckhams of cricket in India and Pakistan, for example. How can we get them on our shows? How can we engage and interact with them and just make that amazing content that will inform people, it will entertain them, and really, speak to people, so they don't have to, quite frankly, switch over to other channels and pay huge costs for subscription services, when actually, as a public service provider, we're making that content for you. And the pictures that you just saw coming up on the screen there, that was from a Pakistan trip. That was in December last year. I'd been at the BBC for about 3 weeks, and my assistant editor came over to me and said, "How do you feel about going to Pakistan?" And I nearly fell off my chair. I swear, I was so excited. So that was to cover the Pakistan v Sri Lanka game in Rawalpindi. A historic moment, because Test cricket was coming back to Pakistan after 10 years. So that for me will always be a big milestone in my career. And then the IPL, which unfortunately has been postponed. But again, I've been given the huge responsibility, sort of thinking about what kind of content can we make that people will really love and enjoy and come back to time and time again, and for BBC Sport and our coverage to have the go-to content.
Yeah, and you're doing amazing work, and we're super proud to have you on the show. Would love to hear more about the podcast, if you can tell us how that creation kind of spawned. And I know it was existing already, but what kind of flavors are you adding into the podcast?
The Doosra podcast has got everything. It was a little bit strange as a program maker, filmmaker, to be asked, would you like to produce a podcast? And I did kind of hesitate for a moment, and thinking, I've never done anything like that before, but actually the skills are the same in terms of editorial. You're still putting together a program, and I've got 3 fantastic presenters. Atif Nawaz is a British Asian comedian, really great and loved in this country. Isha Guha, World Cup winner, ex-England cricketer, and Ankur Desai, who works for the Asian Network. So 3 really great personalities. So what I'm bringing to them are really big star names from the connections that I've kind of built up over the years. We've had people like Yuvraj Singh, one of the biggest names in Indian cricket, on our show recently. He talked about his illustrious career and the great work he's doing with his foundation at the moment. Moeen Ali, one of the biggest British Asian names in cricket, and an England World Cup winner. So really proud to have him on the show. Shahid Afridi, big name in Pakistani cricket as well. And again, the foundation work, the charitable work that he's doing. So what I'm bringing are this big kind of A-list cast basically to the program, but then also these great presenters, I'm pushing them to kind of draw a bit more, what do these guys get up to outside of cricket? And then not forgetting women's cricket as well. We've had the Pakistan women's cricket captain on our show. We've had Smriti Mandana from India as well. So it's kind of given women, that push and that platform where maybe they would have been considered, but not in a direct kind of informal way, where presenters are having a chat almost like with friends. And we're being picked up all over the world. Our social media clips are going viral. We're getting great responses. We're getting name checked in India and Pakistan. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more? What are the dynamics between the men's cricket and the women's cricket? Because women's cricket, just like women's football, has become more popular, I think, with the generation coming up. It's available in schools more, in the training programs, and the funding. How do you see those dynamics cooperating in terms of diversity and fairness and equality?
Well, they're cooperating really well. And our job as program makers is to make sure we give them that platform. You just have to look at the audience figures for the Women's World Cup recently in Australia. And those were fantastic. That just shows us that, again, we know there's that appetite. I know both in India and Pakistan, the BCCI and the PCB are making great steps in terms of their strategy and how they're pushing women to take part in programs and improve their profile. So we are getting there. It's still slow, because obviously in countries like India and Pakistan, we still need the academies. We still need that push at grassroots. There are the cultural differences. Whilst, 10 years ago, we are making great progress. Here in the UK, the ECB have a South Asian women's cricket program as well. And that's great. I've had some involvement in that as well. And it's a really exciting time to be in sport, and particularly, you know, pushing women and saying, look, you know, you can get involved in this, you can have a career in sport, you can watch it. Cricket is for everyone, quite frankly.
Now, I actually did buy a cricket set once upon a time for a friend of mine, because that's one sport I've never played before.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to go out and do that in a socially distanced, respectable manner. So speaking of which, how are you planning for, you know, what is going to happen with the season ahead over the next 12 months, whatever season that is around the world? So what kind of dynamics are shifting there?
Muki, it's going to be a really tricky one. Social distancing, and you know, the health and safety is foremost. You know, whichever cricket board, whichever country you go to, that's going to be top priority. It looks like it will be played behind closed doors, quite frankly, which is going to be a challenge for us, for the fans, obviously. For the fans and the players not having that audience engagement. I mean, if you look at something like the IPL, for example, that is all about the fans. We work very closely with the Rajasthan Royals, who are absolutely fantastic, and we're hoping to go over and spend quite a bit of time filming with them. When the IPL does resume, again, that will be behind closed doors. The PSL, the 100, the big tournament that we were working towards, that's now shifted to next year. It's going to be a tricky one. There'll be some kind of a biosphere kind of environment where, you know, the players will have to quarantine and play behind closed doors. It's a different set of challenges. But as a program maker, I kind of think, hang on, there's a wealth of stories. You know, these guys, 35 players coming over from these different countries. They can't play cricket 24 hours a day, surely. Can they?
I'm sure some of them can somewhere.
I'm sure some of them can, but we want to make great content with them. So,
exactly.
Look forward to that.
And BBC as a broadcaster has such legacy with sport and sport production. This, even if it's behind closed doors, it still creates the opportunity to do these live streaming, finding that remote production, experimenting with 5G and so on and so forth. So we can talk for hours about this. I normally don't, you know, so we regroup on that in the group call. Thank you so much, Archie. That's super, super, super cool insights into the world of cricket, women's cricket, men's cricket, podcasting, and everything else in between. We're going to shift the topic just slightly and introduce our next guest, which is Ursula Macfarlane, filmmaker extraordinaire. Most recently, I like to say extraordinaire because I think you are one cool lady. You have had some amazing achievements over your career, and the recent nod that which we will be talking about now is your documentary Untouchable, which is about the Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment scandal case, which actually came out before he was before his trial actually came about. So would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about how you got started and leading up to this documentary.
Okay, so yeah, well, I got into the business a bit later than most people. I think I started working in this business around when I was about 29, 30. And I'm always reading that Ava DuVernay had a kind of previous career. So that makes me feel a little bit better. Because at the time I used to think, oh God, you know, I'm so old. I'm too old to be doing this. But I had done other things before that. I'd lived in Japan, worked in Japan, teaching, worked in PR, which was a very strange job, publicizing orchestras and stuff. So I had this kind of weird sort of business teaching kind of background. And it was a friend who was at the National Film School, actually, who introduced me to a friend of theirs who was producing a graduation film. And I just left the job that I currently had that I was really unhappy in and went off and helped her produce her graduation film. And that sort of was the bug that got me started. And then after that, I guess it was, you know, quite traditional, worked as a researcher, then worked as an assistant producer, then as a producer, and then decided, you know, no, I want to be the one sort of responsible for this, you know, the one making ultimately at the end of the day, you know, the buck stops with me in terms of the artistic decision. So, and I ended up being a director. And I mainly make documentaries, although I have done some scripted work as well.
And again, we applaud your work to date and would love you to kind of give us a deep dive into the Harvey Weinstein documentary. Yeah,
so that came about. I was working, the lady on screen there is a young actress called Paz de la Huerta, who was, you might remember her from Boardwalk Empire. And actually her dismissal or leaving that show kind of coincided with her being raped by Harvey Weinstein twice, according to her. It's so difficult because I spent all of last year when we were publicizing this film and going to film festivals and at the Sundance Festival, and that was before his conviction for rape and sexual assault.
Right.
And it was kind of drummed into me that I couldn't, just talk about this as a done deal, that it always had to be alleged and as people allege and apparently, Whereas now I don't have to say that anymore.
You're right.
I can say he's a rape, and it is, it's a very satisfying thing for me, obviously, because, I spent a long time listening to those women telling us of, their indescribably awful experiences at the hands of Harvey Weinstein. And then obviously the way that they were discredited and attacked by him and his lawyers for, nearly 2 years actually before the trial. So, it's a great sense of satisfaction that we and others, not just us, but, other journalists and films were able to give them a platform to talk, some of them a platform, because obviously there's dozens and dozens of accusers, to give them a platform to. And I remember we went to the Sundance Film Festival with this film, we premiered it there, and I would go around doing these interviews, and I was with Rosanna Arquette, who's actually the only really famous actress in the film, because I did, most of the women in this film don't have that kind of public profile. And that was important for us because we wanted to make sure that, there were quote unquote ordinary people there who'd also gone through the same thing. And they would always say to us, so, should Harvey Weinstein be going to jail? And Rosanna would go, yes, absolutely. He should be locked up tomorrow, kind of thing. And I'd have to go, well, obviously, if he is found guilty in a court of law. And it was just really, really frustrating. Anyway, I don't have to do that anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, it did shed light on lots of detail of what was happening back then, not only to the women, but to the men who were involved in sometimes masking what was actually happening or being paid off, et cetera, et cetera. What was your emotional journey when making this documentary? Because it is a sensitive subject, and Harvey Weinstein is not the first person, unfortunately, to be accused and trialed and jailed for these kind of things. So
yeah, no, absolutely not, and he certainly won't be the last, sadly. But I do think the high-profile nature of this story has enabled other people to come out, and I hope that, in the future, people, victims, because unfortunately it will happen again, will be able to speak out more quickly and hopefully stop this happening in the way that it has been happening. But to your question of the men, I think, it wasn't just Harvey Weinstein's colleagues and employees, but it's a whole network, a web really around a lot of these powerful men, and they mainly are men, running these studios and businesses and corporations all over the world, because they have successful careers. And, if you worked for Harvey Weinstein, and you did well, your career was kind of pretty much guaranteed. So a lot of those people had a lot to lose by speaking out. And so the people that appeared in our film, the men, or not all men, but the colleagues of Harvey Weinstein, and many of them have been accused of covering up and of being complicit. And I don't think it's that simple. I think some people knew that something was happening. Some people definitely knew what was happening, but I think a lot of them kind of guessed and perhaps were too frightened, or for the reasons I've explained, didn't want to say anything. And I think that, I feel that the people who did appear in our film are incredibly courageous, because let me tell you, we spoke to dozens, if not hundreds of people like that, who didn't want to talk to us.
Yeah, and with the lasting impact that the film has had, what do you see? What is the change that you think needs to happen in this industry to shift less harmful, behavior on set, in castings, etc.?
Well, I mean, there have some changes. Some changes have been made, and I think mainly in the US. The Screen Actors Guild has, forced new practices in terms of, I think every set has to have a kind of, I can't remember what they call them, but anyway, someone that you can go to if there's any kind of bullying or harassment or anything that you're uncomfortable about or unhappy about, you can go to that person and report anonymously. There are various, anonymous reporting platforms and phone lines. But, these are sort of dealing with the symptoms. What we have to do is get to the root of it. And I think that's very much about gender parity in terms of not just women directors, but women writers, women heads of studios, women managing directors, and then the story content changes, and then it feels appropriate to have lots of women making the films as well as appearing in the films. And, when I made this film, we had, deliberately so, we had female composer, director, obviously, producer, assistant producer, assistant camera, many of the people involved in the post-production process. And they weren't all women. And that was also a deliberate decision, actually, because I did want men to be involved in this conversation and for it not to be a kind of, let's ghettoize off and the women can go off and make their film. I wanted it to be inclusive, but it was largely women. And we, made a decision to go out and try and hire female assistant cameras, which, again, the camera world is the sort of stereotypical strong, director of photography. But no, there are some really brilliant young female DOPs and assistants who, training up to be directors of photography. So, so that's a kind of little microcosm of it. And I think if more of that could happen, then if there were more women just kind of in positions of power, I don't think people would get away with it so much.
I agree. And I'm sure the rest of our Soho Media Club fans agree as well. We know that we've got lots of great questions coming in. Thank you so much, Ursula, for giving us that amazing insight into such an important, impactful documentary and an important subject that should never be ignored. So we are grateful for you for making that film and bringing it to light. And we're going to talk to you a little bit later in the group chat about some other aspects of filmmaking and the festivals and what's happening during the COVID. And we're going to go to our last one-on-one interview with our final speaker, which is Eiffel Mattsson, who is all the way from Sweden, producer and head of production for Yellowbird Film and Television. Now, I was about to start into like a Skål Heilongor Swedish drinking song, but I realized that I don't have a beer like I normally do at Soho Media Club. So I'll just imagine that happened in my head. So welcome, Eiffel, all the way from Sweden, very international Soho Media Club. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at Yellowbird.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on board. It's such great company to be part of this panel. So I always think I started into this business yesterday, but I realize it's like 20, 30 years it was passed by this like that. And basically I started and left the business and I came back and I've done that a couple of times, but I've stuck to this business for the last 20 years, coming back to college, doing media on a university level. And since then, I've been specializing in production management, producing, going from production manager to line producer. And lately, I've been lucky to be the head of production at Yellowbird, because the company is now growing. It's an amazing opportunity now for many companies in the Nordics where there's a big demand for content, which of course created this perfect storm of many productions starting to go right at the time when the COVID pandemic just started.
So speaking of COVID, tell us a little bit more about the productions you've been working on as those sandwiches popped up on cue.
Well, it's not a very pretty picture, but it's an example of like small little details, what's going on in productions. This is just an example how catering needs to be compartmentalized, because of course the less contact between the crew members, the better when it comes to the infection rates, etc. So in this case, we're wrapping up all the foods. We're making sure there's distance in the lineups. Gloves. It's not much difference what's going on in the rest of the world, of course. It's part of how we're adapting to the situation while we're shooting.
I mean, you know what? You've carried on with some productions, which is pretty amazing in itself, when there is the fear living everywhere about what to do, with your crew, with what's happening with production, even from writers to runners and the funding and everything in between. Can we divert slightly? I would love to hear a little bit more about how what is your philosophy and as a producer, and is there a difference between like that Nordic way and kind of the rest of the world, vertical and horizontally type of productions?
Well, the Nordic way, it sounds a bit fancy to say so, but
it is fancy.
Until a couple of years ago, we still do. We have a much more horizontal hierarchy way of working. So it's a very close collaborative work where the decision making, it's not one person making all the decisions. You are basically having decision makings done throughout the whole spectrum of the team, which works well when we're just 20, 30, maybe 35 behind the camera. But even the Nordics are getting international. We're growing in size. And while we're growing in size, then it becomes more essential to have the more international way of filmmaking, which is having a vertical hierarchy. Well, the decision making is left to more managerial type of people.
Yeah, right. So and how does that? Are there flaws in that model, or do you find that normally works in quite a smooth manner? Because I suppose if someone's starting off in the industry, they start that way, don't they? Rather than,
let me put it this way: there's a certain nostalgia going on right now, and going back to smaller crews, because there's an advantage of having smaller crews now during the pandemic. So the old ways of doing shooting film, which is, when I say old, we're talking in Sweden 10 years ago.
Right.
People are talking and going back into that, and to keeping the team small, making it a bit more manageable. And especially when we have so much content demands, because even through the pandemic, all the streamers, all the broadcasters are still asking for content.
So speaking of which, we didn't really dip into yet the popularity of Nordic noir. Nordic noir. Say that 10 times, people. Do you find that this is still a genre that's in demand, either by the industry or the audience in general? So with Yellowbird making a lot of like high-end dramas, and the way that Nordic noir fits in there, do you see that that's having a lot more longevity than people might expect?
Longer than we thought. I mean, and we're happy for it, of course. I mean, we have the history of Wallander and Millennium behind us, which was a great part of our company's legacy. And but we are not only depending on the Nordic noir, but we're happy to continue to do so at the same time that we are widening our horizons and looking to the other genres. So recently we're doing fantasy, we're doing adventure stuff, we're doing thrillers. So we're trying to show the global audience that the Nordics can create not just the Nordic noir as a genre. There's more to offer from us, so to speak. Exactly.
And you've got all the girl with the tattoo series behind under the belt as well, which I much prefer the Swedish version films, by the way. They smash everything. And then what about, what is production going to be like for you in the next couple months, let alone the next 12 months?
Well, it's a bit double-sided because we specialize in doing international setups, but at the same time we have local productions going on. So Sweden, luckily, has been one of the countries that had restrictions that are applicable for shooting. So we're able to shoot even through restrictions. But at the same time, any production that has had any detail part of the production or the whole production going outside. I mean, I have personally was overseeing a production that was supposed to be shot in Lithuania, and the weekend before principal photography was supposed to be started, we got the call where we say, you got 4 hours, we are closing down the borders. And in this case, we didn't have the crew in Lithuania, and the decision making there was, okay, well, let's hope this eases and then we can come back.
Mm.
And basically we have to leave the country. And now we're 2 months, 3 months afterwards, collaborating very closely with the broadcasters, discussing all the options, going up through the ABC alternatives in order to come back. Because, I mean, in this industry, you never give up. Once you start something, you want to finish it.
Right.
And as an example, we got 3 other productions that were completely local, and they only had to go through the Swedish restrictions, and 2 of them are complete, and 1 of them is about to be completed. And you saw some of the pictures from those productions.
Right. So it's a mix of kind of persevering, mixed with safety first, mixed with the show must go on.
Always safety first. Always safety first.
Safety
But
first.
I mean, there's a couple of different ways that we've been affected. Logistics, things are we're avoiding to have using public transport. People are more or less transported with own drivers or going by taxis.
Yeah.
At the same time, flights and trains have become more expensive because the restrictions that have been applied make the schedules more apart. And Sweden, even though our population is not that big, the country is quite large. So, and we choose for scenic views to shoot in really far away places. And normally the infrastructure normally is very good. But when we have the pandemic going on, then the tables get turned and you have to manage it in another way.
Yeah. And does all of that pivoting and the tilting and managing different ways fit in with your personal philosophy in production?
Yeah, I mean, my personal philosophy is that in order to get into this type of living, you need to get a taste of the different parts of movie making and drama production, because there's always a fire to extinguish. And I mean, when I became the head of production a year ago, I was thinking, oh, lovely, now I get to get an insight in different productions at the same time, instead of being focused in one production. Little did I know that this year will be proving to be quite a few fires to extinguish. But I have amazing colleagues that are handling their productions, that the producers and their respective line producers and production managers are balancing, so to speak, every production in different ways, but still managing quite well with the restrictions that we have back here in Sweden.
Right. Well, I mean, we commend you for persevering in the safest way possible. So thank you so much, Eiffel. Really appreciate that one-on-one. And now we're going to welcome all of the speakers back into the room, back on stage. Round of applause, as if we're live in Soho. We're about to go back. Soho.
Thank you.
So welcome back, guys. As a panel, you are all so respected and diverse, and you've achieved so much in your own ways. Want to kind of like talk a little bit more about some of the ways that you are influencing the industry. So like over to you, Yu-Fai. We didn't even touch on your BAFTA involvement. Do you mind like telling us a little bit more about your what you do with BAFTA on a broader scope that does not break Chatham House rules, of course? And
Sure. After this year's BAFTA So White hashtag thing, I was invited to sit on the steering committee to look at why there were so few non-white male nominations. And interestingly enough, we're looking at everything from the membership to the industry to the films that get nominated, and it's a really interesting sort of exercise to do, and hopefully BAFTA can come together and make some really interesting decisions on how we can kind of make the film landscape much more diverse than we've seen in recent years.
Thank you, Yu-Fai. And I know, Ursula, you're also a member of the BAFTA committee. What's it like from your perspective?
Yeah, I was just asked to come along to a consultation about gender inequality, and specifically to be looking at the judging sort of process, and talk about ways in which that might be made more inclusive and potentially diverse. It has struck me that every time you look at the nominations for Best Director, obviously that particularly interests me, that mostly are men. And how do we get into a situation where more women are on that nomination list and hopefully up there winning it as well? But we seem to be and if you actually go back over the years, it has not got better. I mean, that's the thing. You kind of think, well, it must have got a little bit better over the last 5 years, but it hasn't.
No.
So, yeah, I think, and all credit to BAFTA. I really feel that BAFTA are taking these things very seriously. They have a new chair of BAFTA coming in, Kulhan, who's just a fantastic guy who I think will bring a lot of change. So I feel optimistic.
Awesome. That's great work.
Me too.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm a member of Royal Television Society, amongst other organizations, and we do see changes happening from the top. The committees are becoming more diverse. The conversation is more diverse. Some of the sessions that we are talking about and booking become more diverse. And so, speaking of which, Eiffel, in your opinion, before I throw the next question to you, I do want to throw a quick plug to all of our audience around the world on LinkedIn and YouTube to keep your questions coming in. Our co-founder, Jessica, is on the screen at the moment, who is currently moderating all of the questions coming in. So keep them coming in, and we're gonna throw to our audience directly right after that. But Eiffel, from your opinion, what other kind of ways does can the industry collaborate better?
Well, I mean, we have to realize that the pandemic is going to be a game changer. Things are going to happen. We used to work internationally, but that doesn't stop us to continue communicating and adapting to whatever new ways of shooting are going to appear in the future. I mean, Sweden is, for example, we are very dependent when we do large productions in shooting abroad, where there are countries with tax incentives, because we don't have tax incentives, not at the moment. And that means that the collaborations that we have established before, the international collaborations, those are very essential, and hopefully they'll still exist once the pandemic is over. But we have to be aware that in certain countries, those things might change.
And then as far as thank you for that. I can't agree with you more. And then it is the same around the world. I want to know about some skill sets. So Archie, over to you. In your opinion, do you think that there are certain skills lacking in the industry at the moment? And what can we do to raise the profile of where those skills need to be filled in? And what can we do even in our current situation? No matter what happens in the future, we still need to educate anyone coming up. It doesn't matter what age you are, but whoever wants to be making films, making television, experimenting with innovation, etc.
I think it's really important. We live in a very tech savvy culture where young people, they can shoot films, they can record things on their phones and kind of devices and what have you. What we're doing as broadcasters is adapting to that. Maybe thinking about making content that adapts to that particular audience, for example. I think we're living in strange times, and it's kind of sort of looking out to people and thinking, what do you do really best? What do you do really best? And maybe kind of almost putting together a kind of Avengers Assemble team almost. My example, I'd never produced a podcast ever. I listened to plenty of podcasts, but I had no idea I could do that using the skills I already had in filmmaking, using editorial skills. So I think it's the time to kind of take stock, look around us and see how we can make that collaboration work at all levels, from grassroots upwards.
Right. And are you finding that places like the BBC are incorporating more diverse apprentice programs and internship programs?
There's certainly an appetite for it. So it is really looking at what our audiences want. We're a public service broadcaster at the end of the day. So actually we need to listen to our audiences. What do they want? What do they want to see? How do they want to get involved in us? And that's how I'm hoping we can retain our audience.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to throw something to all of the panel, just to kind of like go around. We're on stage together in our lovely secret venue, which is Sundog Media. So thank you very much, Sundog Media. But what would the utopia look like in the film and television production industry as far as gender equality goes? Who would like to go first with that? Ursula, maybe?
Did you say as far as gender equality?
Yes.
Sorry, you went a bit out there.
Yeah. What does utopia look like as far as like the gender equality?
Yeah, I mean, people have been talking about. I remember I was on a steering committee a few years ago that was looking at inequality of female directors. It was for a directors thing in film and television, and it was absolutely shocking. I mean, the figures were just beyond shocking. And it was, let's get 50% by 2020, and it's now 2020. And I don't have the stats to hand, but they haven't changed that much, and in some areas they've actually gone down. So I think it depends sort of what sectors, whether you're an indie film or studio film or documentary or factual entertainment. There's differentials in different sectors, but I would love to see it 50-50. But then I think that's about power structures as well, because I think it's that unconscious bias that I think we talk about a lot at BAFTA, actually. Unconscious bias. We're all biased. We can't get away from that fact. We need to deal with it and then work out how we change that. And I think, I know that there are many commissioning editors and exec producers who always seem to hire the same people.
Right.
Because of that stereotype. They think, oh, that person can, there's a safe pair of hands. And I think it's the safe pair of hands thing that stops younger people coming up. So I think we all need to kind of take a hard look at ourselves and think about, why do I go for that person and maybe not that person?
Yeah, Archie, you're doing a lot of nodding there in agreement.
I am indeed. Yeah, broadcasting has traditionally, been a male-dominated area, but actually now I'm starting to see that shift. I mean, I've been in the business coming up to 24 years. I've been there a long time. Right. And initially, when I started out in non-sports, it was always like, oh, you want to be a presenter, you want to be a reporter, and it was like, actually, I want to produce and direct. So that has really shifted. And as we were saying, Ursula, we want that 50-50 split. We're seeing more female assistant editors. I certainly look up to, a handful of female role models for me. And certainly, from personal experience, when I was growing up, there was nobody who looked like me on telly.
Yes.
Moira Stewart, who's in the news, and Oprah Winfrey. They were my two heroes. I still are till this day.
Those are great idols. Those are fantastic idols.
And they were my heroes, like I said, they still are today. But I think it's really important, now hopefully, women can see, women like me in broadcasting, in, on the sports side, and say, actually, you're doing it. And, maybe there is an avenue where we can give you a hand and pull you along. We need to drop the queen bee syndrome. And I've seen a lot of that over the years I've been in the business, the queen bee syndrome and the imposter syndrome. Once we work on those two things, then women like us, Ursula, myself, we're happy to give everyone a hand because we know how hard it is to get there in the first place. I'm proud to do it.
100 million%. And we will put that into our Soho Media Club blog to remind people of those facts, which you can find on sohomediaclub.com, where you'll also find information about our upcoming festival, which was planned to be in around July and August in a secret location in Soho. But watch this space. We're not giving up hope, but we are implementing safety first under all circumstances. But if you head over to the website, you'll learn more about our membership. The images you saw of the Soho, Tom sneaking into seedy, dirty Soho, are available for free as an open source, and the blog and more information and all of the previous shows. But now it's time for those burning questions coming in from around the world across LinkedIn and YouTube. And to help me field those questions is our lovely co-founder, Jessica Lapswala. Over to you, Jessica.
Hi, Muki. Hello, panel. Thank you very much. What a great discussion. So I'm going to read out a few feel-good comments from people. We all love a bit of feel-good. So Ursula, comments coming in saying, great contribution. Thank you very much. Love your work. the documentary that you did was hugely important and very well put together. Yu-Fai, some comments for you around what a great story, Yu-Fai, what an incredible achievement. Archie, some great work on diversity in sports, keep it up. And comments for Eiffel coming in, talking about fascination with the Nordic way, which is very much to do with core social morals and a quirky approach to the usual. So thank you, everyone.
I like that.
Very engaged audience here. I'm going to kick off with a question from Harry Ashfield. A question for any of you, really. Do you think that we'll ever see a return to the normal state of film sets once this is all over, or do you think that we will just adapt to the new normal?
Eiffel's got his hand up first. Over to the Nordic way.
Well, my quick answer is I hope not. I hope, because normal was the problem to begin with, not just in our industry. I mean, we know there's a lot of logistics with flights, etc. That's it's part of this global way of consuming that we have. And I see a future where we are still shooting in other countries, but we're being more conscious about how much we need to move around and who needs to move around. I mean, I see remote production, so to speak, where we can collaborate with other companies in other countries and ask them to do materials for us, but not necessarily need to go there in order to do so.
That's a very good answer.
Brilliant, thank you, Eiffel. Shall I go to the next question, Muki?
Yes, please.
A question for Archie. Archie, in terms of women in cricket, along with women's sports in general, do you think that this will be affected to a far greater extent than the men's equivalent as a result of the pandemic?
That's a really tricky one, because cricket, like any other sport, you know, football as well, it's a business like any other. We've got to generate revenue. So from a cricket perspective, obviously the counties are suffering at the moment. There will be some impact, but I know that the ECB, for example, our BCCI and the PCB, you know, the three boards that I work with quite closely, are really, really keen to put women's cricket at the forefront of everything they're doing. It's top of their agenda in terms of their strategy. So we're hoping it won't, you know, women's sport won't slip through the net, quite frankly. It's a big mountain to climb, quite honestly, and it's all revenue and safety. There's a lot of issues to deal with. So I think because this is such a new thing that everyone's dealing with, I think it's kind of baby steps. We're just seeing what's going to happen with safety being an absolute top priority.
I think we might have time for one more audience question as we're coming up to our hour, which has gone by so quickly.
A question around, do you think that we will see far less foreign film documentaries post-COVID as a result of less traveling?
As we speak to someone in 3 different countries. 4 people, 5 people, 6 people in 3 different countries. So
I didn't hear the question, actually.
So Yu-Fai, it's about seeing less foreign films being produced and distributed as a result of the pandemic.
No.
We have a lot of no's coming across the board in our Brady Bunch squares here.
I'm waiting for the IPL to resume. You know, the Rajasthan Royals are waiting for us to come over and get going. And for me, it's about the human interest stories outside of sport. We can't tell those. We can try and tell those remotely, but actually being in the place, sensing that, you know, showing the culture, the drama, everything around these remarkable stories. You know, and I'm talking about people who have started with nothing and that trajectory that they've had to get to the top of their game. You know, it's going to be a challenge, and I hope we can just resume with it as quickly as possible in a slightly adapted way.
Yeah, because I think the pandemic has shown us how connected we are. And I hope that that's not lost when this is all over. But I think Eiffel's right. I think we have to think about our consumption as filmmakers. And, you know, we always are flying around the world constantly and, you know, using up vast amounts of energy. And I think that's what we need to think about. But I don't think we will stop going abroad and telling those stories, because I think there'll always be an appetite for it. And I think even more so now, you know, we've seen Wuhan in China, we've seen South Korea, a lot of those people have become a bit more familiar to us. And I think we need to start thinking, how do we realize that? I've got a shoot coming up where I have to direct it remotely via some kind of YouTube link. And it's going to be fascinating, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. You know, it's not what I planned to be doing, but it's the only way right now. And I think it's quite exciting to be learning these new tricks and getting your mind around, you know, how do I fix this problem? Because I feel you said we're all about solving problems, you know, putting out fires, solving problems, and we have to adapt like everyone else in the world. We have to adapt.
Exactly. The insights you guys have provided have been super helpful. And again, Pippa, who's on our team, is going to write up a blog. Thank you, Jessica, for fielding the questions coming in from all around the world, all the comments that coming in. Thank you, Terry Levy. Thank you, LinkedIn user number 3. Right on, buddy. We want to remind everybody to follow us on all the socials, which are coming up below the screen. Soho Media 1 on Twitter, Instagram, Soho Media Club London. There we are. Thank you on our little prompter. And remember, we are the last Wednesday of every single month. No, rain, shine, no matter where we are in the world, you are with us. We're all together. And hopefully next time I'm proposing we all grab a pint and have a secret happy hour together. All back to mine, folks. What happens at Soho Media Club stays at Soho Media Club, right? So remember to tune in. We'd like to send out a massive, huge, gigantic virtual thanks to our partners this month, Sundog Media Toolkit. And also thank you to Tom and Jessica and James behind the scenes, and all of you guys out there, the hundreds of people that are tapping into us every month. We want you to stay safe, keep talking, keep 2 meters apart, keep inspired, keep reading, keep watching webinars, keep making podcasts, keep writing blogs, and most of all, keep staying awesome. Why not? I don't know. We're going to close out this Soho Media Club session with a very special shout out to our friends Will Dawson and Will over at Raw Pictures, who have put together a pro bono clip, which is open to use to support Winston's Wish, to thank the frontline workers. And Winston's Wish is a special charity raising money to help children and their families who have lost someone or affected by the pandemic. So thank you so much again. Tune into sohomediaclub.com. Stay tuned, sign up, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Muki.
My name is Muki.
Thank you.
Thanks, panel.
Bye-bye.
You should know. Just say the word, we'll take on the world, and just say you heard.